Ladies and gentlemen, I'm live on YouTube. I got a very special live stream for you guys. We're going to get it in a sec. I'm going to bring him in. Man, so many of you guys are here in the chat. I appreciate y'all. Before we get any further, I got to drop the intro one time. Hey, yo, what's going on? Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Ruslan. I'm a hip-hop artist, creative entrepreneur with KingsDreamENT.com. This channel exists to encourage, empower, inspire you to live out God's dream for your life. And we cover all kinds of different topics. I wish I was linear and played into the YouTube niche. Probably helped me grow faster if that was the main goal. But I think it's important for me to use my platform to have meaningful conversations to also empower you in growing in God's dream for your life, which, you know, is also loving people and being empathetic and understanding and all those different things. So we're going to attempt to demonstrate that here. Now, just so you guys know, This video is not scripted. I literally don't have any notes. I don't have any points.
Me neither.
Yeah, we're just gonna have a conversation. I been seeing the stuff going on in the news with you know, everything from the situation at the border to the comment made about sending people back to their country. And I have in light of all this, I'm releasing a music video on Thursday called Third Option. It's a song from my album, Indy Jones 3. The song is actually inspired by a book Miles McPherson wrote. I've read this book. It's a really good book. I was a part of his conference. It's called The Third Option. It's about racial reconciliation from a gospel point of view. And so that's what the stream is going to be about. Some of you guys like cool out. Don't be triggered. A few guys already like, why does the title of the video says my black friend? He's not just black. Like, listen.
I'm his black friend.
He's one of my hundreds of black friends, and we just wanted to create a fun title to get y'all in. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I'm bringing in my man, my mellow, known as dude for a decade plus, Lavoisier.
Right. Salute and God bless you. I'm Lavoisier Cornerstone from GrowTheHeckUp. Thank you for having me, brother.
Yeah, man. I think people have been waiting for this one for a minute.
Yeah. Why people triggered that I'm your black friend, man? See, that's the snowflake stuff I'm talking about, man. What's up?
Yo, do me a favor. Just try to stay on the just a tad bit. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, like this. Okay. Yeah. I'll be mindful. Excellent.
Perfect.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
So
right.
listen. I hate doing over the virtual world of internet interviews. I hate,
Right.
I'm not a big fan of it. You are probably one of like 3 or 4 people that I'm doing it for, as he's cleaning off his camera, you. I did one from Brandman Sean. I'm actually going live with Curtis King on his channel, and I'm doing one for David Lovick. Other than that, I don't do virtual stuff. Me and you are going to get it in. Hopefully, I'm going to be in Houston August 15th. I'm definitely in Dallas August 16th. So we're going to have like a more meaningful podcast where we go
We'll do a follow-up, right.
Yeah. And so, man, first of all, kudos to you, bro, with Grow the Heck Up. One of my favorite platforms. I love the conversation that you guys have. You've been doing this for a while, and I just appreciate how versatile you are with your execution. You do real estate. You've done music in the past. You're one of my favorite people in the internet, man. So if you guys aren't familiar with Grow the Heck Up, make sure you guys subscribe and you're following Lavoisier.
Yeah, salute, brother. Salute. The respect is definitely mutual. Always has been, for real.
So yesterday I did a video. It was called Why I Don't Like Talking About Race and Politics. And unfortunately, we're going to talk more about race and politics. And the video was really about, I think sometimes the positions could be so polarizing, so opposite, so extreme, so down the line. No one actually is listening to each other. They're just yelling at each other. And I was like, man, I just want to share some of my thoughts because I think some of these things are things we could disagree on. Some of them are humanitarian things, and some of them could be misinterpreted, and some of them could be cleared up. And you were in the chat, and you were like, yo, I don't think that Trump's comments were racist. And I was just kind of like, what? And we even got a comment, someone saying like, Lavoisier got to be hacked. He got to be hacked because, you know, how he would never say this. And so that's kind of how sparked the dialogue today. And I was like, yo, let's just get on live and just chop it up. And I thought it'd be fun. So basically, my question is, you know, when he says send people back to their country or send them back to their country for people that are U.S. citizens.
Right.
Growing up as an immigrant, some of you guys know I'm an immigrant, Armenian, Russian, originally from the former Soviet Union. When somebody told me, like, go back to your country, like, it was very, like instantly, there was a racial dynamic to it. Even though I'm fair-skinned and I'm perceived as white by society, I still have the immigrant experience. And so that was very thing. And so when the president, the leader of the free world, tells 4 congresswomen to go back to their country because he doesn't like their policy, which, if I'm honest, I don't like some of their policies. I don't like a lot of their policies, especially some of the stuff in the Green New Deal. I'm not a big fan of. But when he tells them to go back to the country, you said that there's another interpretation of it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Right. So if I may, and I'm going to answer for sure, what was the context when those people told you to go back to your country? What was the surrounding context? What was going on? How did that come about? It
was, you know, school ground, like playground, kids being mean. You know what I mean? I'd have an accent, and you know, you're getting clowned, and it's like, well, you go back to your country. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was the vibe of it. You know what I mean?
Right. I figured that. So that being said, first let me say, I can understand why someone thinks something is sexist and still not see it as sexist myself.
Okay.
So just because I have an opinion that it's not racist does not mean that I can't see why people think that's racist, xenophobic, and everything like that. Not dismissing that ideology or whatever.
Okay. So hold on. So say that one more time. Say that one more time, because I don't want to gloss over that point, because I think that is so powerful in terms of just giving people a practical tad bit to say, this is how you can engage with people. Say that one more time and just break that premise down for me.
Okay. Just because I hold a position doesn't mean that I can't understand why you came to a different conclusion. I mean, I learned that from the Bible. The more you move around in different theological camps and circles, even when I still hold my opinion, I'm like, I see how you could process that verse that way. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree, but I can have an understanding of how you arrived at that conclusion. And the same with sexism, racism, or anything else. I may not accept the findings of we can be looking at the same thing, and I can come to a different conclusion and still have an understanding how you arrived at your conclusion without having the same conclusion. So first, I just want to say, in the interest of empathy and everyone who's hurt by those comments, I understand why people perceive them as racist. But the reason why I asked you what the surrounding context was when people said that to you is, I believe it was ignorant. I believe it's unbecoming of a president. Definitely not a dignified presidential kind of thing to say at all. But also, we're talking about first of all, it's ignorant, not just from a moral standpoint, but because only one of them wasn't born here. Straight ignorance. The second thing is, he's talking to women, in my opinion, who really do bash America. I'm not talking about America needs to improve. We got Congresswomen saying that America is Nazi Germany, has concentration camp, is Nazi Germany, and is actually garbage. AOC said America's garbage. She said, yeah, we're doing better, but compared to what we have now is garbage. And so while I don't think it's the best thing to say, I don't think it's the right thing to say, but racist is a different thing than being mean or unbecoming or ignorant. So you got these 4 women who are bashing America all the time. And when someone says, well, if you don't like it, go back. I think the context allows for a different interpretation than just, racism. See, because if we're just like, we disagree on healthcare, we disagree on abortion, we disagree on legislation about Title IX and the gender bathrooms, and then I just say, go back to where you came from, like, whoa. But the context, when you're saying America's Nazi Germany, we got concentration camps, America's garbage, there's dual allegiance to Israel, and all of these type of things, that it doesn't mean he's right either. I'm not saying President Trump is right, but I'm saying the surrounding context allows for another interpretation, in my opinion, than just racism.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Sure.
At what point did it become problematic to be critical of a country? I don't agree with everything you just pointed out and their quotes on that stuff. I don't agree with. I don't agree that, America's garbage. I don't agree that. I still think it's the dopest place to live on earth. I don't agree that we have concentration camps. I think we're doing a horrible job at the border and the way we're handling that. But I don't believe we have concentration camps. It's not Nazi Germany. I don't believe with any of those statements, right? But Trump sat there during Obama's presidency and said all kinds of wild stuff. sparking the birther controversy and conspiracy, right?
That was started by the Clinton campaign. He picked it up and ran with it for sure.
Yeah, so he picked it up. So I don't know who started, if it was the Clinton campaign. Doesn't surprise me one bit.
Right, no doubt.
But he said all kinds of wild stuff and was very critical about how the country was going and where the country was. The whole slogan was "Make America Great Again." Right? And so how is that any different? Maybe he's not using language like garbage and whatever, but how is that any different than them saying, some of the same things that they said? Like, why is that? Is it because they're women of color? Is it because they are immigrants? Like, why is it so different when they say it and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, go back. Well, it's like Trump said it and it was cool. It was like, yeah, make America great again. Great for who?
That's a great question. Right, that's a great question. So a couple things. The Make America Great Again slogan, originally, it's a Ronald Reagan slogan from his presidential campaign. When Bill Clinton was running for president, it wasn't a campaign slogan, but he said in a speech, "We're going to make America great again." Now, when it comes to why it's okay for, there's a video, by the way, that we're putting out probably today, just on the strength of this conversation, where Trump is just bashing America. So I think it's okay for Trump because Trump is a hypocrite on things. A hypocrite is not a racist automatically. Okay. Right? It's like, and I'll tell you one way where I got caught out there, when he called Omarosa a dog. Just because of my sensitivity and my hypersensitivity to racism in this country as a black man, when he called her a dog, I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's a black woman, dog, B-I-T-C-H? Like, what? Like, I was like, yeah, look, what's going on here? And then I saw somebody tweet out like 20 different people that he called dog, like male, female, and all kind of people. Now, still mean, still not becoming, still ignorant, not racist. So that's the delineation I want to draw. When I say something is not racist, I'm in no way saying that it now becomes appropriate, but being mean and being a jerk is quite a different thing from being racist.
Fair enough. Because race would then imply intent, right? Race would then imply intent. Let me ask you this. What about in the context of everything else he has said that at worst is racist, at least is dog whistling, and all the white supremacists, white nationalists, alt-right groups light up on the internet when he says some of these other things. How do you, like in what he said about Charlottesville, what he said about other countries, shithole countries, what he like all these other things, like in context, can we draw the conclusion that, man, he said some pretty wild stuff about people of color. You know what I'm saying? Like, So Richard Spencer, and for those of you who don't know, he's one of the most prominent people in the alt-right movement. The most fundamental way you can probably get what Richard Spencer represents is by checking out his interview with Roland Martin. Roland Martin smashed him, sunned him on history and all of that. And I'm not even in the Roland Martin camp. Richard Spencer was on CNN the other day saying that Trump is not doing much for white nationalists. He's like, yeah, that comment is cool, but he's not really doing anything for white people. So one of the leaders of the alt-right, doesn't seem to think Trump is doing enough for white folks. Okay, that's one. Okay. The second thing is, what you asked me about, the other things in context. When I saw the Charlottesville comment, for months I ran with, wow, how is there fine people on both sides? How is there? Then I read the transcript. Again, saying something better and saying something wrong is different from saying something racist. When I read the transcript up until a couple of months ago, I believed that that's what he said. He didn't, though. What was the transcript? He said, they're very fine people on both sides. And they asked him, he said, no, he said, clearly, anybody can go reference what I'm saying. He said, I'm not talking about the white supremacists. They should be condemned totally. He was actually talking about the people that didn't believe the statues should be torn down and want the right to keep their statues and their monuments and stuff like that, which might be another problematic thing, but it's still not what I was told. Again, another clip I used to run with when they said these people are animals. Don't those statues represent, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the Dixie flag, like all of that, isn't all of that racist? Like, you know what I mean? Well, you know what? Well, it depends, and it depends on how life goes, because now my wife is white and Mexican. Now I have an uncle. I love this guy. I need to do a reality show with him because there's nothing he can't do. He fixes cars, he builds homes, and he's like straight
hillbilly, straight out the backwoods, one of the most loving, kind people I ever met. We had a disagreement about the Confederate flag. When he pulled the Confederate flag out of his back pocket, it was on his wallet, and we're debating about it. You know where we were? He was driving me to the bank because my car had broke down, and he's been one of the most generous people to me since I ever got down here. And so I'm not saying I don't understand why people see things a certain way. But I'm just saying, as I'm moving through life and I'm experiencing people and I'm hearing their perspective, sometimes there's not as much vitriol and intent to be racist and hateful behind some of these actions and decisions as people think.
Let me ask you this. What about people who are a lot of evangelicals, a lot of Christians who won't even give you the, yeah, that was ignorant, that was unbecoming of a president, that was said in poor taste, he shouldn't have said that. What about those people that are like relentlessly defending him? Because I feel like you're objective enough to where you could say, yeah, I don't know if it was racist, I don't think it was racist, but he shouldn't have said it. That was terrible. He played himself. Like, how do you answer those people? Because there is a huge demographic of people that are like, no way, he's great, he's amazing. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, now let me get to defending the evangelicals for a minute, not because I think they are correct, because obviously you asked me a question, I'll tell you what I think if I think President Trump is wrong. But let's take CHH for instance. I see people retweeting Sean King, liking his stuff. Every day I scroll through Instagram, I see Christians liking and supporting Sean King. Sean King the other day supported domestic terrorism and said the dude who tried to firebomb an ICE facility was a hero, and we need to storm the camps by any means necessary to set the children free, People support Hillary Clinton openly with no problem, right? And I'm cool with that. I'm not saying you're less of a Christian. I'm saying we need to slow up with the moral grandstanding because Hillary Clinton says Margaret Sanger's a hero. Her Hillary Clinton's mentor was Robert Byrd, who was a Klan senator. She eulogized him. Bill Clinton said, he was a good old boy. He just did what they did to excuse away this guy's Klan membership. His name is Robert Byrd. So again, one more point I wanted to make. So my point is, and a huge amount of these people are pro-abortion. Obama used Title IX civil rights legislation to make boys allowed to use the girls' bathroom and vice versa, right? And so a lot of Christians that we know support Obama, think they're a beautiful example of what a couple should be and all of this kind of stuff. So sometimes I believe in talking to people on the other side sit there and watch like, yo, you support Sean King, you support abortion, you support all this stuff. And I don't know, but I'm venturing to understand. They say, you have the nerve to talk about who's supporting who. And so I think the lack of humility that we're willing to excuse the evils in our camp because we've elevated racism to the highest evil that you can do. Right? So, Sean King supports domestic terrorism. Sean King is always race baiting. Sean King the other day said white Christianity in America has always been about white nationalism and the KKK. But right. So we excuse all these things and knock them out the way for the people who are fighting for racial justice, only to point at the person to say, how are you supporting XYZ? I just think sometimes people don't understand how much moral grandstanding and self-righteous indignation they have. And so I don't excuse the evangelicals who condemn Trump, but there are a lot of people on the other side who support things that are horrific. President Obama, love him. Great example of what a marriage should look like. But he's also the one who said, I raise my daughter with my values. If my daughter gets pregnant, I don't want her punished with a baby. Now, as the leader of the free world, first black president, that's a horrible message to black America.
Yes, I agree.
Right? And so with that being said, I still respected him though. Right? So sometimes we got to understand that other people have, just like we've chosen to make racism and immigration our burden of passion, other people have made abortion and other things their burden of passion. And so when you point at them as if you have more compassion than they do because they don't feel how you feel about a certain thing, it looks kind of silly at some point. So I just think we need to come to the middle like you and I are doing and say, well, why do you think that's not important? But the whole, you look right now, CHH, Twitter, and a lot of black Christians, it's just a lot of broad brushing. White Christians are this, evangelicals are this. And I think now, and then demanding that someone be humble in the face of being berated is the height of arrogance. That's that woke stuff. I don't know if you've seen these Black Lives Matter rallies where the black people screaming at all the white people and the white liberals are like, well, how can I understand? Teach me.
Yeah,
I don't want a white man kowtowing before me like that. I'm a man, he's a man. Discuss your ideas and let's do it.
So what about the send her back chants? Do you like him not saying in the middle of any of those chants at the rally, and then afterwards saying, I didn't support those chants, yet you let them ring out for 13, 14 seconds. Yeah.
He let him rock. I think Trump is playing dirty, and I think politics is playing dirty. I just don't think President Trump is more dirtier than the people that other people are championing. So again, I don't think those chants were appropriate. Were they racist? Probably from a lot of people who were saying it. I can't say for certain. But yeah, I don't know.
If Trump gets ASAP Rocky out of Sweden's jail, is everything forgiven?
That's funny. Yo, and okay, so let's talk that. Let me tell you what
I was gonna say. No, I said as a joke, but he has done a ton for prison reform. He's done a ton for getting a lot of people's sentences overturned. He's done a lot of good stuff when it comes to that. And I don't know how much of that is intentional. I don't know how much of that he's listening. I don't know, but I think he actually has done more, I believe, than President Obama did in regards to some of that stuff. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great point. And here's the joke I make, right? Newsweek put Obama on the cover. President Obama. I like to speak about these people with respect, whether it's Bush or Lincoln, or whoever, right? Mm-hmm. President Obama was on the cover of Newsweek magazine. You know what they called him? The first gay president. So President Obama came to us with a very diplomatic disposition. He was endearing. He spoke with compassion and conviction, humility. He was thoughtful. He didn't shoot off at the mouth. And he said, we're going to change everything. And we thought, he was going to help us as Black people, right? Mm-hmm. Diddy said he didn't do as much. Tavis Smiley and Cornel West said he didn't do as much. So President Obama let a lot of people down. Mm-hmm. Then you have Trump who comes along, right? And then he's like, your schools are horrible. Your neighborhoods are trash. What's going on? You're behind in everything. Give me a chance, right? That's much more brash. Mm-hmm. But he gave $4 billion to HSBCU. Mm-hmm. He gave the potential for possibly $1 trillion to be injected into dilapidated neighborhoods, not just Black neighborhoods, suburban, rural, and urban. Mm-hmm. Because now if you invest in one of these neighborhoods up to 10 years, you get no capital gains tax at all. Mm-hmm. So that's an incentive for these evil rich people that Bernie Sanders wants to take all their money to invest in these neighborhoods and provide economic revitalization. Mm-hmm. The First Step Act. And then that's the criminal justice reform. Now, again, at some time you're like, well, how true is this? I respect Van Jones. Van Jones, a diehard liberal Democrat dude. Mm-hmm. He said President Trump and Kushner have been amazing on prison reform, and he credits the conservatives with doing more for criminal justice reform than his own party, and his own party rebuked him for that. So I'm not saying it makes it true. I'm saying Van Jones is a liberal. He has nothing to gain by saying that. Yeah. And so when I sit back and I look, and I'm like, the guy who speaks recklessly and crazy is actually doing more than the guy who gained our trust based off of his skin color. Yep. That's not to deride President Obama. Yes. But it's just to say that things aren't always what they seem when you peel back the layers. Yep. Oh, and then there's the Second Step Act that's coming, where they're working on getting people able to get jobs, even though you've committed a violent felony. There's a woman called Angela Stanton. She's Martin Luther King's niece, goddaughter. She's a heavy Trump supporter. Her organization is getting 4,000 jobs to ex-offenders in Alaska in the fishing industry right this minute as we speak. And somebody said, oh, well, the federal court system, that's just for white people, because who commits federal crimes? Well, it turns out to this day, 90% of the people plus released under the Criminal Justice Act have been Black. So, that's how I size up some of that stuff.
Why do you think there's this thing with immigration? Like, why does he seem, from the situation at the border to they're sending us their rapists and their worst? I just got back from New York City. You're from New York. You know what I'm saying? LA. BK. Yeah. Big cities. The majority of the jobs, the service jobs that tend to happen in big cities tend to be by immigrants. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these people are legitimately seeking asylum. If we know what's going on with MS-13 in all over Central and South America, these people are seeking asylum, yet we're so like border security, build the wall, border security, build the wall. You know what I'm saying? And from all the evidence that there is out there, that like people that are looking at this, the harder you make it for people to enter illegally, the more the cartels are going to have the power to get people here illegally. You know what I'm saying? Now it's not just crossing a river. Now you got cartels that are getting paid thousands of dollars to do that, right? The harder you try to punish people for using drugs and make it harder for, you know, people to access drugs, the more the cartel gets a foothold in that. When as we see the legalization of marijuana, the legalization of these things, you actually see the cartel lose power because now they become legitimate businesses, like the same way we've seen marijuana in Colorado and California, right? And I'm doing a whole separate like piece on this whole thing, but like, I think we have such a backwards view, or should I say conservatives tend to have such a backwards view of border security and drugs, when it's like the stuff we're doing to protect our borders seems like the very stuff that's going to hurt us with more crime down south, with more people trying to flee, with more drugs flying in, you know what I'm saying, with more of our guns going south. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about, like, why is he so hell-bent on all this, like, build a wall? Because I think he's right about the jobs leaving. I said this yesterday. I just think he's wrong about who they're going to. The jobs that are the factory jobs that are leaving, the coal jobs that are leaving, they're not leaving because of illegal immigrants. They're leaving because of automation. They're leaving because of technology. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, we're blaming the illegal immigrant. The illegal immigrant has nothing to do with the economy going wrong. If anything, he's doing the jobs that most Americans don't want to do or don't like to do.
Wow, that's a mouthful and a mouthful to answer, so I'll try to keep it succinct. I think that the data doesn't support everything you just said. So in 2014, Huffington Post, right? And listen, sometimes I misspeak, sometimes I'll say 50% and it's 40. So please, like, if I'm wrong on anything, it's not because I'm trying to mislead. I'm not a robot. I'm kind of good with facts, but sometimes I miss steps. But try to follow. 2014, Huffington Post, before the whole debacle, said 80% of the women who are crossing the border are raped or molested. That's like a lot. Right. And so when you say they're rapists, I think that's a bad characterization, bad thing to say. Again, another thing I thought was racist, and understand why people say it was racist, but I also think President Trump is not the best at saying what's true, even when he's saying what's true. When he said Hillary, that he's for the most liberal kind of abortion, they want to kill a baby right up until birth, that sounded so like a crass accusation, but then you found out it's true. And so now when you talk about why the heavy focus on immigration, go look up George Borjas. He's been studying immigration for more than 30 years. He has a very good article. I don't know where it was. It might have been in New York, but I'm not sure. George Borjas, before the election, criticized Hillary and Hillary and Trump on their stances on abortion. And he tried to demonstrate where they were both wrong. Look up this name. His name is George Borjas. And so he didn't have a dog in the fight. And he said unequivocally, absolutely, low-skilled work and low immigration hurts low-skilled workers, many of whom are people of color. So this is a fact that low-skilled work actually hurts African Americans and other low-wage voters. The second thing, or the third thing that I might want to deal with, or that I would ask someone to deal with, is that ask yourself honestly, is Trump saying anything that people haven't said? Or is he saying it more crassly, or is it because he's Trump? Because if I was more prepared, I would have had the videos and I could quote verbatim. President Obama said, you do not have a legitimate claim because you don't like your neighborhood. So no, being in it, listen, I'm not saying it that to be callous. I'm saying, and you know, I know you asked me with respect, brother, you said, why bring up Obama? Well, the reason why I bring up Obama, because I have to put things to the test to see if people are keeping things on the same scale. To David, he put him to the test the same way. He said, let me tell you about this guy who did XYZ, you know, ABC. What do you think about that guy? David said, kill him. He said, oh, that's you, right? So sometimes I bring up the opposing thing and ask people what they think to see if this is just a bias. Like, okay, you don't like sagging pants? Okay, cool. How you feel about breast cleavage, right? If you're cool with breast cleavage and not sagging pants, then I doubt the validity of the consistency of what you're saying. So I don't do that to be disingenuous. I just like to test people's scales. So that being said, Joe Biden on record as saying they're bringing tons and tons and tons of fentanyl and cocaine across the border. Before President Trump. Obama said you do not have a legitimate claim because you live in a bad neighborhood. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Hillary Clinton all voted for border fencing because of the problem. When Obama was on the stage campaigning against Hillary, he said, we have a problem, and George Bush is not doing enough. And he what did he do? He went on to deport more immigrants than anybody up until his presidency. And the cages that we're now beefing about, he built. Well, why did he build those cages? Was Obama the cruel one? No. It's because when they started doing tests on, listen, everything I'm saying, please, and if it's wrong, inbox me. I'll be accountable for it. I'm not the master of this, right? I'm just talking. When they started doing tests on the children, they found that a third of the children were not related to the people that they were with. And so they said, hold on, wait, this is why Obama did it. He said, wait a minute, we got to figure this out because people are exploiting the loophole. What is the loophole? When you have a child with you, you are more likely to have a legitimate asylum claim, and you also can't be held for more than 20 days if you had a child. That was the policy that's on the record. Right. So that's how people are exploiting it. So now, again, go look this up. This is from a CNN analyst who actually is not pro-Trump at all, but he warns Democrats about being too harsh on Trump about things he's saying is true. And I'll end with this quote, with this stat. From 2014 to 2015, asylum requests increased 240%. 240. Why? Because more people wanted to come here? No, because it was discovered that there's a loophole. Yeah. So now that there is a loophole in our system that is being exploited. And the last thing I'll say on immigration is this. One time I was pulling up at McDonald's, brother, and some McDonald's or some drive-thrus, people come from two different ways. I wanted to be a Christian, and I let somebody in front of me. The people behind me were honking, beep, 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 beep. And I was like, lady pulled up on me. She's like, what are you doing? I said, I let them go in front of me. She said, but I didn't let them go in front of me. I was like, so I was trying to be compassionate by let somebody go in front of me, but I was being unfair to everybody else behind me.
Fair enough.
I have family who's been trying to get over here for years, and they don't have a loophole to exploit. So these people need to go to the back of the line to be just. Talk about compassion, to be just to the people who are in war-torn countries who would love, with all due respect, who might love to be in that cage for the opportunity to get closer to be here. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it okay. And also, United States legally accepts 1.1 million residents every single year. That's more than any other country on planet Earth.
Yeah, that's good. I think what I'm saying is all the people that aren't finessing the loophole, all the people that are actually coming, with their legitimate kids, all the people that are here who have been here for decades. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know of a handful of people that have been here for decades that are at risk of getting sent back. People that have kids here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think some of that stuff, and we're like hell bent. I don't have no problem with the criminals going back. I don't have no problem, you know what I'm saying? Like with the violent people going back. But I'm talking about people who are here, who are contributing, who are doing their best, sending those, and they literally have kids and wives here that are citizens. Now, that's not. That doesn't seem very wise. That doesn't seem very I get what you're saying.
It doesn't seem very loving or compassionate.
It doesn't. And I get what you're saying. We'll go back to the end of the line. Well, whatever. But it's like, I think we're in the same way we were talking about how we can do broad strokes, right? We can do very broad strokes and forget about the individual. There are individual cases where, I have a friend, RG, he did a whole album called Raul. His dad got deported. His dad was here for decades.
We play his music in the crib. My wife's son loves his music.
His dad was here for decades. Yeah. Him and his brother and his mom are all citizens. Yeah. That to me makes no sense. And once you're deported, that's it. It's a wrap. There's no second chance. So now you have a man separated from his family. Again, we can use the broad strokes. We can use the legal, they have, other countries. And I'm as a refugee, as an immigrant, like I came here as a refugee. I would still never in 100 years be like, separate a father from his family who's trying. That makes zero sense to me.
Let me. That's valid. That's compassionate. And I don't disagree with the sentiment. But I think that sometimes ideas are put forth based on how they make us feel as opposed to what's actually practical sometimes. And I personally feel like I've been affected by some of these things, like, okay, minimum wage and all of this kind of stuff, right? But then I started looking into the history of minimum wage. I changed my mind on it. Affirmative action, it sounds good. Then when I look at the history, so here's where I'm going with that. The people I'm talking to, they're Hispanic. Some of them are not Trump supporters, but they're like, yo, we know the risk when we come here. And so it's almost like, with all due respect, now I'm going to pull my race card. Let us out of jail too then. Right? Like, so then, like, how does this now become like, you know, black people have made up 50% of the prison population in major cities since 1860, before the Civil War. Since we're getting people up out of cages unfairly and putting families back together, let's retroactively take back some of these you know, and that may even sound more callous, but there's a selective compassion, because this is the issue of the day that deserves compassion, but by no means is it the beginning and the end of compassion. These are complicated issues. And I know that when it comes to family, who am I to say it's complicated when that's your heart? But I asked a brother the other day, he's a believer, straight from the streets, got family who's legal and illegal. I said, brother, help me understand, because I don't want to be callous, bro. Tell me what you think about this. He said, I got to be honest. When we come here, we know the risk. He said, I know a dude who was in ministry, serving, loves the Lord, and, you know, and he got put back. He said, yo, why don't you just jump, fool? Like, well, he's in Cali. He's like, yo, why don't you just jump? Like, he said, because my wife, you know, her house is tied, this, that, and the third. I don't want to mess up things for my family here. So now he got deported back. Now, that doesn't make him right. Somebody asked me when I was speaking about it on Periscope, is he king of the Hispanics? No. But what I'm saying is that painting it as racist or xenophobic because you have a different opinion about it is misguided.
Fair enough. Okay, so let me ask you this. So
because there are Hispanic people who agree and have had family.
Yeah, and there's Hispanic Trump supporters, and there's Black Trump supporters, and there's all that. Right. So again, the individual versus the community, all that kind of stuff. I'm with it. I'm Armenian. In 1915, there was a genocide against the Armenian race by the Turkish government. It was a big deal.
Never heard about that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It is what inspired Hitler's genocide against the Jews, right?
Wow.
He used that as inspiration. This is the genocide of 1915. Anybody can Google it. Armenians, till this day, I remember being a kid, not saved, not a Christian, growing up, going to Armenian Orthodox Church, because that's what we did as refugee Armenians. The reason why I came out here as a refugee is actually that a lot of that tension ended up fueling the pogroms of Baku in the 80s, which then created more tension between the Azerbaijanians that we were living in their nation and the Armenians who were in Armenia, who are Armenians but living in Azerbaijan, right? So that 1915 Turkish thing impacted me directly. And we came out here. Now, granted, they attempted a genocide on us. It didn't happen. Now, the genocide of 1915, April 15th, we still talk about that every year. I remember being a kid in church, and it was like a thing. Like, they grieved. There was a moment, and I was like, what is all this? And they were like, well, 1915, this and this and this happened. I was like, that's terrible, right? 80 years, 90 years later, we were still talking about this, right? And Kim Kardashian has talked about this.
Right.
And there's all kinds of people that have talked about this genocide in 1915. Now, my question is, the Armenians are still upset that it's not recognized as a genocide by the government of Turkey. Still upset till this very day. The UN will not recognize it as a genocide till this day. And Armenians, by and large, I'm not talking about the individual Armenians for every single thing, but by and large, as a group, we are still pissed that this is not recognized as a genocide. It happened over 100 years ago.
Right.
I've never had somebody tell me how to grieve my history, how to grieve our collective trauma, how to grieve these things, how to process. I've never had anybody tell, or even heard of Armenians, whether it's Europe, white Americans or whatever. It's like, wow, people find out that's pretty terrible. Man, that sucks. That should be recognized as genocide, right? That, by and large, that's the response. When you talk about the incarceration rates for blacks, when you talk about, the impacts from the Jim Crow to the redlining, to all these things, that there's a collective trauma that black people have endured in this country for 400 years. Why do you think there's such a huge pushback about the way black people the black community choose to mourn or process its collective trauma? When black people say, hey, these policies from the 50s and 60s that prevented us from buying homes in specific neighborhoods, that impacts us till this day because we couldn't build wealth. Why? And people are like, well, just get over it. Just grow grow up. Just get over it. Just grow up. Mexican people got over it. The Native Americans got over it. Y'all just need to get over it. Like, why do you think that it's so different with the black community?
You gonna get me in trouble, bro. Man, why do I think it's so different? So you asking me, why do I think people say that, or why do I think people don't want to acknowledge it?
We acknowledge the genocide of the Holocaust, right? Anybody that denies the Holocaust, I think that's considered hate speech. Like, I think you could get in trouble for that. Anybody that denies the Holocaust. Anybody who says anything triv about the Armenian, like
hate speech isn't real, but go on.
Whatever. I'm saying that there's a level of, like, if anybody says that the Holocaust didn't happen, we're like, you're crazy, right? If anybody says the Native Americans were treated right in the way, like, we're like, nah, they got a pretty crappy hand. If I say, man, my Armenian people, this is what happened, 1915 genocide, it inspired Hitler's Holocaust, we would be like, yeah, that's terrible. But when it comes to the issue of black people, why is, by and large, it seems like conservatives tend to be so dismissive? On a macro level, we're not talking about individuals. Don't say I'm a white.
See, you know what's funny? When you said general, I was going to break it down. When you say conservative, that helps me a lot. Not because I'm a conservative, but because of the differences in the philosophies. I think, and again, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong, guys, but I think the conservative philosophy assumes ability. It assumes ability about a lot of things.
Yes.
Whereas the progressive philosophy presumes, I don't want to say presumes morality, right? Okay. So the conservative ideology says, listen, you can, everybody can. The progressive ideology says, well, how could you? Of course you can't. You're just a good person trying to make it, right? But the progressives will never tell you. Okay, let's talk about the wealth gap. Let's talk about redlining. Let's talk about the wealth gap between black and white households. But let's just also talk about the fact that the poverty rate for black married couples has been in the single digits for the past 20 years. So if you talk about the wealth gap, you got to add the other factors. So yeah, there are some cultural ideas and philosophies that the black community has bought into, that the white community sold them. That are destructive. Yes. But you know why we see it more in the black community? Because we didn't have hundreds of years of our families being together to begin with. Black people didn't lead the sexual revolution, but they jumped on the train. You know, there's a saying that goes, when the rich catch a cold, the poor get pneumonia. Well, Dr. Claude Anderson has another.
That gave me goosebumps, bro.
Yo, he adapted it. He said, when white people catch a cold, black people get pneumonia. So if blacks and whites are rising in America, and then the whole ship starts to go down, who's going to hit the ground first? The people that were already on the bottom. So we're seeing the destruction of white households. We're seeing rises in diseases and drug use in white people. It's just to a greater degree for black people because we had never ascended to those heights to begin with. So the very same things that are exploiting and hurting and destroying black communities are also destroying white communities. It's just destroying our communities at a faster rate because we could afford to buy into these policies much less.
What I'm getting at is, why is there, when you say that, right, why is there a dismissal of the...
Because the conservative philosophy assumes an ability that the black community, when I talk to them, they tell me that I'm bugging. When I tell people, yo, you got Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, you got these people on your phone, on YouTube, they be like, yeah, but I can't though, right? And so that's how I ended up with a conservative ideology, not a white ideology. I believe you can. I believe that when you look at what Nielsen says about how much black people over-index on Twitter and how we watch more television, I'm like, well, you could change your life with Duolingo, 15 minutes a day, learn another language and up your value in the marketplace like that.
Yep.
Right? Just that simple for one thing, right? Yeah. So I think that it's not just a racial thing. I think the conservative ideology lends itself more to presuming the sinfulness of man, right? More along the lines of people are not good, right? But people are able and are capable.
Yeah.
And so that's
why can't both be true though? Like I agree with everything you said, and I promote both. You know what I'm saying?
They can be, but that's just why I don't think it's a racial thing alone. I think pick yourself up by the bootstraps is a conservative philosophy, not for blacks, but it's my family owes me my duty. Like, how can we say that we need more? And this is just my interpretation of the philosophy, and I could be wrong, but progressive and liberal ideology seems to say the government owe you more than the person who brought you here. Don't tell me as a black man the government owe me more than my daddy. My daddy brought me here. Where's him? Where's he at? Somebody hold him accountable. So yeah, the government has played its role, but I think the liberal ideology sometimes excuses the things that are in the power of people's control.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what I'm always advocating for, and what I'm always I don't want to say promoting, is that there is a beautiful coexistence, a complementary coexistence between personal responsibility, which I think a lot of times starts with information, starts with hope, starts with community, as well as an acknowledgement towards a systemic community trauma that people have endured. In the same way that we would say if somebody has seen a murder, and that is going to affect them throughout the course of their life. They're going to have to work through that. In the same way that different communities have experienced certain degrees of trauma, that's going to affect those communities different, whether that's slavery, or whether that's the Planned Parenthood prying upon black people, you know what I'm saying, and intentionally placing those abortion clinics in black neighborhoods. There's a collective trauma there that different people have. And so
for sure.
I guess my issue is like, why ever tell anybody how to grieve? I would never tell a rape woman how she's allowed to grieve. You know what I'm saying? I would provide resources. I would provide information. I would try to provide hope. But or a woman that's had a miscarriage, I would never tell her how to grieve. I would say, hey, I'm a man. I don't know what it's like to be a woman who's been raped, or to be a black person who's came from, hundreds of years of systemic racism and laws and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what it's like to be on the back end of the war on drugs, where your dad and your mom was on drugs, your dad was on drugs, and then they went away for dozens of years in really nonviolent offenses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what that's like, so I'm not going to tell black people how to grieve or how to deal with their issues. I'm just going to be like, hey, man, this is what works for me. You know what I'm saying? This is what worked for me.
And I believe that there are a tremendous amount of people that are callous toward black suffering, just as I believe there are a tremendous amount of black people that are callous toward black people. And again, I do the comparison thing because for me, consistency, there are things that happen in my life that show me I don't care about other things, right? Like, so something will happen, I'll be like, well, look at you. Like, this is what I say to myself. So when I put something on the scale for other people, it's just not to expose the hypocrisy, but it's almost like let's be honest here. Some of the worst jokes and most horrible things you can find said about black people is said by black people. There's a comedian, Lavelle Crawford, who got a video out called Trump is a real N-word. And he's going on about how Trump is a real N-word because he doesn't respect women and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, so when I tell somebody, like, for instance, like you say about, you can't tell somebody how to grieve. Sometimes that can come from two different places, right? So sometimes two people can say the same thing from two different places. Your personal trainer who's invested in your well-being, or your football coach, or your motivational speaker may tell you, come on, don't be a weakling, man up, you can do it. Maybe that's what he told himself. So maybe it's not from a callous place. Maybe he esteems you just as much as he esteems himself.
But the difference is that I invited that in. I invited the personal trainer to come alongside and mentor me and push me beyond my limits. If somebody isn't in that place, if a black person or whoever, a Native American or whatever, a black person in the South Side of Chicago with limited resources, with limited information, and they've never gone beyond their block. And there's people like this. We know you come from New York. You know there are people in New York in the borough that literally have never gone beyond their block.
5-block radius.
Yeah, they've gone to the bodega, they've gone to the gym, the school, and that's it, right? Like, how, if they don't have that information, if nobody's coming alongside of them, if no one's offering, if they don't know that they need a personal trainer to get them through that ceiling that's on top of them, how is it that somebody from the outside of that community can look in and be like, well, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, especially someone that claims the title evangelical Christian?
That's valid. That's valid. And I guess I'll say that as a person who grew up being too sensitive to words, as a person who grew up and I was taught, what you say to me? Who you talking to? Right? I still kind of flash that attitude sometimes as a Christian, Ruslan. You know me. I'm like, what happened? Yeah. Like, let's have a conversation, right? So I guess that now that I'm more liberty-minded, I'm more like, well, he can say what he wants. If we find somebody in a position of power that has the ability on a case-by-case basis to hinder us, and then we find that they're biased, then that's cause for calling it out. Other than that, there's more white people caping for black people than ever. I think Malcolm X and Martin Luther King will come back and see all these white liberal progressives and be like, wow.
Yeah, that's a fact. I'm talking about on an individual level in terms of the vibe of social media, in terms of how dismissive comments can be, in terms of that's what. So people are even asking me who's telling, we're talking about how we grieve. A lot of you guys are in the comments section. Look at the comments of the last video I put out. A lot of people are like, "Well, I'm an immigrant and I'm a da da da," and Ruslan, you figured it out. Look at my black friend who figured it out. They got to figure it out. Stop complaining, right?
You know what I'll say? I'll say that's hard to know where that's coming from on an individual basis,
right?
Because you can say it from a place of callousness, or you can say it from a place of faith in humanity, right? So, and that's hard to tell. There are people who are tremendously callous toward the suffering of others, and that's a fact.
Yes.
And just speaking for those who don't know me, who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, I preached in the projects with holes in my sneakers. I taught myself how to code in order to teach kids entrepreneurship and coding. I served my community, worked in the project, did outreach for years. And you know what I didn't find? I didn't find many people who were willing to put their hand to the plow for their own people. So I got to a place of understanding, like, look, I feel you guys with what they need to do, but the next killer rapper is sitting on a bench and you walk by him every day in your own neighborhood, and you go to your latte, you go to Starbucks with your latte, your Jordans, and your phone pods, you stream your Netflix and your Spotify, and you tweet Black Lives Matter. Listen, get on the ground and do for others what you think the government should do for your own people, because discipleship and mentoring is available. And the proof of it is, look how much time and leisure we have. We have double the amount of TVs. We eat out more than anybody ever did. So I guess my biggest contention, the thing that riles me up, is how much those who are advocating for justice, or whatever you want to call it, don't seem to have a mindset to tell people to make the most of what it is that they have, because we have way more than any of our ancestors ever did.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, and I would take it a step further that we have the mindset of justice, but we disconnect justice from personal lifestyle, meaning that you could be super woke but still be disgustingly promiscuous, and those two things aren't in contradiction. You could be super social justice and then like not be married to the women you have kids with, none of them. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's a contradiction. If you want to make a change, I said this in one of my songs called Millionaires, if you want to make a change, your personal life counts more than you know. You know what I mean? And so I'm completely with you, bro. Like, I think
you know what? And again, and get to your point, I had to become numb to what people said, right? Because I grew up in a culture, black culture is just hypersensitive to what you say. Like, what you say to me, I'm ready to fight and throw my life away because of what you said to me. And so when I read Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, I look at fire hoses and, you can't vote here, you can't drink from this fountain. And I'm like, dang, that was hard body. When I'm honest with myself, I live nothing like that. Yeah. Like nothing.
Yes.
I might get pulled over and feel nervous on a late night, but the honesty in me says, dang, bro, we out here fighting over mermaids and sneakers. Right? And so it's almost like it's not enough racism and oppression to go around. So it's like we got to find some now. Yeah. That's not to say that these issues aren't problematic, but people are crying out in the streets from a Little Mermaid Facebook group. Like, you got to, like, that's not put it like this. As a culture to tell me to pop off of what people say, that's not a healthy example for black people. We need to learn to ignore. Let me speak for myself. I teach my kids to learn what to ignore. Where do I get that from? The Bible. It is to a man's glory to overlook an offense. And I just believe that's one of the shortfalls of our culture. And it's not just with black people, right? We're not the only people, but we have a hypersensitive culture based on what you say. And so I think that, some of the stuff is problematic. People are going to be callous to you. But you know what? When I read about different successful people of black and white, they talk the same. Yeah. They say, all the white people who are successful tell you what? People are going to doubt you. They're going to talk behind your back. Racial talking, you have to learn how not to make that so different from any other type of hater. Yeah. You listen to rap music and what they say, haters everywhere. Like, don't make a white hater worse than a black hater.
No, that's good.
They're hating on you. And that's having the emotional fortitude and strength to overcome that and go beyond that, it's immensely freeing.
Yep, and I think we would agree there, man. So I think all in all, like, I think we agree on way more than we disagree on.
Of course, brother. And it's always love everywhere we do disagree.
Yeah, I think if there's what's like, I guess my final thought, I'll leave people with this, and I want to hear your final thought just as we wrap up. Like, my final thought would be, take responsibility of your actions, people watching, including your empathy or lack of empathy to people who maybe don't know or don't have the capacity to process their own trauma. And trauma is usually the thing that derails people from living their full potential. And that's why I'm going to therapy, and that's why I'm trying to be in support groups, is that I want to process whatever stuff has happened, and I want to process it in a healthy, clear way so that I can live God's dream for my life. And I think that starts with personal responsibility, personal accountability, but that also extends to how I view and see people who are different than me, whether they're politically, racially, sexual orientation, or whatever. I have to extend that empathy and that love. That would be my final thought. Lavarcia, what's your final thought? And do you have a question for people in the comment section?
I would say that my final thought is, I used to watch MSNBC, CNN, and a bunch of different networks, and I thought I was getting a diverse perspective. And there were people that I was told not to listen to because they were coons and sellouts. I would advise, I just typed three names in the in the chat: Jordan Peterson, Thomas Sowell, and Shelby Steele, because there are ideas that I've been sold that are benevolent that just aren't as good as I thought that they were, right? Like, okay, minimum wage. I'll make this quick. Sounds good, right? Well, the first minimum wage law was meant to help white workers and disenfranchise black workers. It's called the Davis-Bacon Act, passed March 31st, 1931. Well, if you read what it says, it was to undercut, by the way, the last year that black unemployment was lower than white unemployment was the year before that act was passed. So my point is, sometimes things sound so benevolent on the surface, but they don't. We have to look at what these things have done in the past. Affirmative act, this sounded crazy to me. Anybody who said this to me, Ruslan, had to be a self-hating black person. But when I looked at data, brother, I had to acknowledge affirmative action is hurting black people. Look up the Duke University study. They are admitting black people who can't compete at these schools, not because they're not smart, because Harvard, Yale, and Ivy League schools have to fill a racial quota, right? And so if they can't find enough blacks who actually fit the criteria, they